आजा जिंद शामी आने के तले आजा जरी वाले नीले आसमाने के तले जय हो जय हो आजा आजा जिंद शामी आने के तले आजा जरी वाले नीले आसमाने के तले जय हो
महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि महागणपतिं वसिष्ठवामदेवादिवन्दितमहागणपतिं वसिष्ठवामदेवादिवन्दितमहागणपतिम् महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनूतं महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनूतं महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनूतं मानकोटि प्रकाशं शान्तं महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनूतं मानकोटि प्रकाशं शान्तं महाकाव्यनाटकादिप्रियं महाकाव्यनाटकादिप्रियं मूषिकवाहनमोदकप्रियं महाकाव्यनाटकादिप्रियं मूषिकवाहनमोदकप्रियं पप्पमगमरि सरि सनि सपमगमप सनि सरि गममरि सरि सनि पम सनि पमगमनि पमगमरि रिरि स सानि पमगमरि सगममगणपतिं वसिष्ठवामदेवादिवन्दितमहागणपतिम्
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Kimberly Chan, a part of the great team at Nigel R. Khan Bookseller. On behalf of Nigel R. Khan Bookseller, the future of bookselling, I wish to welcome you with a warm and heartfelt welcome. We are honored to host the launch of this heritage publication, which includes images and excerpts highlighting the survival of a culture which spans over 2 centuries. We are most grateful for the opportunity to highlight the work of Mr. Parasram and contribute to the preservation of cultural history. This book, Beyond Survival, has already gotten great reviews. For instance, Hansard Publication says, the 12 inspirational chapters cover every aspect of life, albeit fleetingly whetting one's appetite for more words and more photographs. And for those of us who love our food, it all started with the humble chulha. Another from Dr. Rajiv Mohabir, author. I am struck by Jai Parasram's stewardship and research as he pieces together an history of those abandoned by empire, illustrating the heritage of survival that populates images and writing. Permit me now to introduce the chairman for this evening's program. In 2000, he received the Vishesh Hindi Seva Samman from the High Commission of India, and in 2010, he received the Public Medal of Merit Gold for medicine. Psychiatrist, mental health consultant, Pandit, and principal of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha Pandit Parasram School of Hinduism. Our chairman is an older brother of the author Jai Parasram. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Dr. Ramprasad Parasram.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sitaram, Namaste, Assalamu Alaikum. My pleasure to be here and to have been given the task of being chairman of this evening's proceedings. Kim has already welcomed some of you, and I'd like to extend my own personal welcome to a number of people who are here, many of them personal friends of mine. Frankly, I don't know where to start, so I'll stick with the protocol, Your Worship. It's a pleasure to have you. Dr. Deepak Pandey, who's representing the High Commission of India. It's a pleasure to have you. And Mr. Ashok Jajoria, who's head of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Cultural Cooperation. We also have a number of friends, members of parliament, former ministers of government, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Nizam Mohammed. I wouldn't do all the welcoming all over again. I also want to let you know that we have many distinguished presenters with us and members of the family. The presenters, I'll speak about them when I introduce them and invite them to speak. And friends of Jai who went to school with him. I just met a number of people who were telling me they went to school with Jai. The first presenter is Mr. Hanuman Singh, Mr. Hans Hanuman Singh. And I actually wondered how I would introduce Hans Hanuman Singh, because there are 1,000 things I could say about you, Hans, but I thought then I would jot down a few things in order that I remain within the allotted time frame for introducing you. So, Mr. Hanuman Singh was conferred the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws by the University of West Indies. As you all know, teacher, producer, broadcaster, businessman, at one time called the youngest member of parliament in the Commonwealth way back in 1966 when he sat in the House of Representatives. And of course, he was the distinguished president of the National Council of Indian Culture. And one of the things that he has left for all times, for all Trinidadians and people in the region, is of course Diwali Nagar. And I was happy to be part of that team when we were starting Diwali Nagar in 1986. And Hans was given the Hummingbird Gold for his service to Trinidad and Tobago in 1990. I could go on and on and on, but I think it's time to invite Dr. Hans Hanuman Singh to come to the microphone.
Thank you, Dr. Ramprasad Parasram. I had, for a little while, the opportunity to share some knowledge with Jai Parasram and a number of students of St. John's College in San Fernando. And as I read the book, I thought of an example of a man who epitomized the title of the book, Beyond Survival. His name was Pari Ramnarayan, principal of St. John's College, legendary teacher of Naparima College before he took over the leadership of St. John's College in San Fernando. 50 years later, there was a celebration of the founding, the 50th anniversary of the founding of the school. Mr. Pari Ramnarayan spoke what he had done all his life. He quoted, because he taught history and he taught English, he quoted from the great English poets and writers, Keats and Shelley and Shakespeare. But interspersed in his address to his students, now successful graduates in all areas of national life, who grew up in the barracks in his community, interspersed quotations from the Ramayana of Tulsi Das. To me, that represented beyond survival. He grew up in the barracks. He retained his traditions. He captured the best from English civilization, and he was able to take his message as the community evolved. Jai Parasram has written an important book, a memoir of great pictures, each one with a story to tell. References made, for example, to the Chulha delight and the evolution that continued. There are some that stand out in my mind. There is a picture in the book of an effigy of Swami Vivekananda, 1995, which was the year the book should have been released, according to Jai's initial plans, a publication of 150 years since 1845. That was not to be, but having read the book many years later, I believe that it represented now much more than it would have had it been completed as planned in 1995. But there stood, and there's a picture in the book of Swami Vivekananda towering over Diwali Nagar, and the President of the Republic of India, who came to celebrate with us the victory over indentureship and the great strides of the community since then, as reflected in the book. He had a prepared speech, the President of India, Mr. Sharma. He looked at the statue, he abandoned his speech, and he spoke. He didn't know, I suspect, our watchwords, but he knew of the message of the Swami, who received world attention when he attended the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. And he made his theme, the President of India, that is, Shankar Dayal Sharma, he made his theme the word tolerance as being inadequate in the development and evolution of a society. And then later on, there is a picture of Professor Anant Rambachan, who was also, like Pandit Parasram and myself, involved in the formation of Diwali Nagar, and who had interpreted Tulsidasa's Ramayana for us for 10 consecutive years, and who today continues what was started by Swamiji more than 100 years before. And because of the evolution of society, because of the greater understanding of world literature and world religion, today interprets the Hindu tradition to the Christian communities and organizations, from the Vatican to the Church of England, from his position as head of religion at St. Olaf College in Minnesota, continuing what was initiated by Swami Vivekananda. The book is replete with pictures and narrative, but pictures that really tell thousands of words, and that will forever be important for a population that doesn't seem to appreciate, to the extent that we might, how we came, what we faced, how we conquered, and the victory we celebrate in the publication Beyond Survival by Jai. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hans Zanemanzing. If I begin to tell you stories that convince me of Hans' commitment to this country, we'll go home tomorrow morning, so I'll leave that for another occasion. But I want to say this. Thanks for inspiring us in many ways, Hans, and thanks for your words this evening about Jai and his book. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, here's a couple of people more that I'd like to personally recognize. Mr. Neil Giuseppe. Jai and Neil, they brought us the news every evening, and they spent a lot of time together, growing together, developing together. And Neil, I'm very glad to see you this evening at this event. There are also a couple of young people who've grown to be very close to Jai. One is the former Chairman of the Chaguanas Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Richie Sukai, and Dr. Valmiki Arjun and his wife, she's here. Of course, I did say that we have lots of members of parliament and the former speaker of the House, former ministers of government. We also have a sitting member of parliament in Mr. Fazal Karim. Fazal, you're a friend for many years to Jai, and we're very happy to have you. Former ambassador, former minister, former everything, my dear friend and Jai's very, very close friend, Mrs. Nan Ram Gulam. It's very nice to have you with us. And so many others. Mr. Shekhar Mahabir will read to us in a short while. But there is one little thing that I neglected to do, and that was to speak about the dancer and the beautiful dance she did, Mrs. Safaya Mohan. And of course, the dance you saw was an invocation to Sri Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. It was actually composed in the south by Sri Muthuswami. It is in Natai Talam, a Mahaganapati Akriti in Ragam. And so I think Natai, I think that would be the Ragam, yes? And so it was a very beautiful dance, as you all witnessed to, and it was choreographed by the really fast-rising star, if she's not that already, Miss Alana Raja. So I'd like to invite you to give Mr. Safaya Mohan a round of applause for her excellent performance. Thank you very much. Mr. Dwarika, he has a bachelor's degree from, Wilfrid Laurier University, and a Bachelor of Education from McMaster University, a Master of Divinity from the Waterloo Lutheran Seminary. He's a pastor at the St. Paul Lutheran Church for 31 years, and he lives in the municipality of North Perth, and he has come a long way to say one or two things about this book, Beyond Survival, and to speak about Jai Parasram. So can I invite you, Reverend, to please now grace the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parasram. Ladies and gentlemen, as a member of the clergy, I'm often called to officiate at funerals where I would say nice things about the deceased. Last year, I officiated at 31 funerals. But today, I'm honored to be invited to a different, more celebratory event, to say a few words about a high school friend and colleague whom I haven't seen for 52 years, and who, as you see, is very much alive. There were about 4 or 5 of us who hung around together at St. John's College in San Fernando. I recall time in class, times at lunch especially, at the corner of Broadway and Keats, at young Sam's parlor, with everybody screaming at the same time, to Mary to serve them. We would have our bread and cheese with lots of pepper and watered down orange juice. Jai would have his doubles and maybe a solo, a red solo. He has even written about a red solo in his book. Jai was always well dressed, his hair combed. I don't think you still comb your hair, do you? Shoes polished and his clothing well pressed. Having been informed by our principal, Pare Ramnarayan, that Jai's father was a Pandit, Jai was treated with the greatest of respect. Whether we realize it or not,
Our friends, teachers, and families have contributed greatly to our success in high school. We were pushed to excel and put everything we could into our schoolwork. We were reminded what we were capable of and motivated to work hard. For that, we are thankful and blessed because with God's help, each of us has aimed for excellence in our respective fields. With our family and friends behind us and motivating us, our teacher guided us and kept us moving forward. Teachers like Mr. Rupnarayan Sankar, who is present today. In fact, St. John's and our experiences would not have been the same without the teachers who pushed us, sometimes beyond our normal limits. But without friends like Jai, we would not have enjoyed our time at St. John's nearly as much as we did. After high school, we went on our separate ways, not knowing where life would take us. I suspected Jai would follow his father's footsteps. He certainly had the temperament and personality to be a pundit, looking after the spiritual needs of people. But you could say I followed Jai's father's footsteps, while Jai served the community in his own unique way as an accomplished journalist and author. And his efforts have brought me home today to this momentous event. I'm delighted to be invited to the launch of my friend's book, Beyond Survival. As you heard before, it's a remarkable book that belongs in every home. Friends, I've purchased 10 copies to share with my siblings, my 2 sons, and a couple of friends. It is a wonderful narrative in words and images, telling the story of our ancestors who left an inheritance for us that we must cherish and protect forever. The philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson defined success this way: to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or redeemed social condition, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have been successful. May I add, to leave a lasting historical account of a people and their struggle against all manner of obstacles, to leave for future generations a strong culture, work ethic, and spirituality, which is Jai's gift to our community and to the world. My friend Jai Parasram the journalist and author is a success story. I congratulate him on the launch of this evocative and emotional book of our history, told with passion that only Jai could do. Congratulations, my friend Jai. And friends, I urge you to seize this opportunity to own this special piece of our history. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, just moving on and feeling the need to recognize one or two other people. Those of you who have a printed program in front of you would recognize that there's been a slight shuffle. And we will have the reading from Mr. Shekhar Mahabir in a little while. Professor Brinsley Samaru, we're very glad to have you this evening. Former speaker, Mr. Nizam Mohammed, of course, we go back a long way. It's good to have you this evening with us. And now I recognize that former Member of Parliament, Ms. Naila Khan, is seated at the back. Pleasure to have you, Madame. And everybody else, those whose names I have not mentioned, maybe what I should have done is to get a listing of all the people present and just read out the names, because everyone present is in fact a friend. Now, the next person that I have to call to the microphone, though, to come to the lectern, is a very, very distinguished daughter of Trinidad and Tobago. In looking at her CV, I became acutely aware that if I read everything that's written here, it would take a considerable amount of time, but it's nice to have you. So my pleasure to introduce Professor Patricia Mohammed, who of course is Professor of Gender and Cultural Studies and Director of the School for Graduate Studies and Research at the University of the West Indies. Many of you know that she is a pioneer in the development of gender studies at tertiary level in the Caribbean, and she has done a host of other things, including informing policy in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. Herself an author, her book, Gender Negotiations Among Indians in Trinidad and Tobago, 1917 to 47, which was published by Palgrave, and then Imaging the Caribbean, Culture and Visitor Translation, published by Macmillan. And of course, among her films are the award-winning documentaries Coolie Pink and Green, and I think it's City on a Hill. So you have done so much to enrich our lives, and it's my great pleasure to invite you to come and chat with us a little bit. Welcome.
Dr. Parasram, Chair, has continuously been observing all the protocols and welcoming people. So may I collectively to this audience of friends, colleagues, well-wishers, simply say Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, and good evening. I want to thank Mr. Parasram who has given me the privilege of a preview of this book, which I, of course, would have read, and to be able to represent it in some small way today with a review. Jai Parasram writes in the preface to his illustrated book, Beyond Survival, that it is neither an academic text nor a historical record. It is rather, he says, a personal narrative, an evocative and entertaining album with pictures that capture the heart and soul of a people who refuse to let their culture die. Despite his clarification, it will be cited as an historical reference, as it traces chronologically and with evidential statements the history of migration, settlement, and remigration of Indians as an ethnic group. It must, however, withstand the scrutiny of the historians and scholars among us as to its interpretation of data and perspectives. I leave the textual contributions of the book for another reviewer, focusing instead on the powerful visual messages it transmits, and for me, the more visceral and valuable contribution it makes to this subject. A full, living color illustrated text beyond survival will appeal to a wide range of primarily viewing readers, not because such readers are indifferent to prose, but because, and the jury is still out on the precise measure, between 30 and 60% of our brain is dedicated to visual functions. So although we might read extensively, the visual map created by images leave the strongest imprint. And we would have heard this already from the way in which people have been speaking about the book. This is not only because images resonate with our own memories, but due to the fact that our brains are more retentive to form, color, and balance that are aesthetically pleasing, or to those that may be traumatic and disruptive to our senses. In uniting the image with text, Beyond Survival will enter a now respectable field of publications, including work by Angelo Bissessa Singh, Geoffrey McLean, Mangal Chattergon, Roshni Kempadu, and myself, among others, who have grouped and regrouped photographs or artistic impressions of the past with the present to reveal many sides of the story of Indian migration and settlement. What is different about this publication? All storytellers, for this is what historians and writers are, write from their lived perspectives. What is the perspective from which this is written? Mr. Parasram and his family migrated from Trinidad to Toronto, Canada from 1988, 3 decades ago. Like the first generation of migrants who left India but could not forget India behind, this book is a record of the Trinidad that Jai did not leave behind him. And what he desires, as we all do, is to leave footprints in the shifting sand, to remind those who come after us of the pathways that have been cleared to make futures for others. The book is a testament to his commitment to produce a family album for his children and others who have become citizens of another place or for citizens of another time. 3 decades, the period of his migration thus far, is calculated in historical time as a span in which another generation is produced. Even with increased flights and improved technologies of communication, migration changes the lens with which we view a homeland. This book offers a post-migrant's view of place and space, a diasporic retention of memory. This filtered lens is an important one in that what he has selected to include from the plethora of images is the once removed process lens that he brings to the never-ending story of global migrations. What is that story that Mr. Parasram tells us? He writes that the journey began in search of a chulha, or fireside as it was also called, and he discovered more than a chulha. The chulha and all the accoutrements that were associated with it, the tower, pukni, simta, even the curved shape of the pots that could fit on the chulha, the hearth and heart of the household and family, is the one that draws him and us first into the image. In the photographs of the chulha, we see the warmth of color it exudes, the flickering red and silver wooden embers against clay. The photograph he uses of a woman cooking the roti, placing it into the hot cave of the chulha for the finishing touches that separates the 2 layers. The scent of roasted flour and the anticipation of the meal that follows stimulates both memory and senses of taste, touch, sight, and smell, and of the multitude of mothers and grandmothers who have gathered clans around them because of their cooking. Reprised again on other pages, he describes not only the clever engineering of this economic design for cooking, but signals evidence of the personal care it requires for maintenance. No squeezy or oven clean, but a closeness to the earth and water and air from which all things organic spring. In choosing to center attention on photographs of the chulha, vegetables, market stalls, food sellers, fishermen, coconut vendors, thatched huts, wooden cottages, women and men and children in domestic spaces, such as a man embracing his child in a hammock with other families seated nearby, all of these echo the continuities of an ancestral culture that are not easily replaced, but are retained in the core of memory as wholesome values. A second set of images that offer an iconic space to locate the entry of the history of Indian migration and settlement is the cultivation and harvesting and processing of sugarcane. In the text, he deals with the unfortunate demise of the industry and the culture that accompanied it in Trinidad. Much of this history is, due to the efforts of my colleague, Professor Brinsley Samaru and others, thankfully being archived for other generations in the Brescian Castle Sugar Museum. The large, imposing photographic spreads of cane being burnt and harvested, of sugarcane processes and mills, estate housing and worker houses, reminded me also of the work of another colleague of mine, Dr. Andil Gosain, who is another migrant to Canada, who similarly recreates an iconic image of cane as a backdrop against which the Indian presence in Trinidad cannot and should not be separated. That two migrant scholars have selected this as a central motif is, of course, not surprising. Of the many photographs and paintings that Mr. Parasram groups around themes that are associated with sugar estates and factory work, I am, however, ineffably drawn by one of two images. The first is the Felicity Bell of the Fuller Estate. It is a magnificent bell, large, well-formed, a rugged patina that can only come from years of weathering. A bell made to resound over a large compound. The bell links the history of both the African slaves before and the indentured laborers who would similarly be disciplined to the rhythms of the workday by this bell. Looking at the image, I'm reminded of the nursery rhyme that we learned from the culture that molded this object. Oranges and lemons, says the bells of St. Clements. You owe me 5 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. If this Fuller Felicity Estate bell could speak, what stories will it tell? Mr. Parasram has attempted to tell these in the photographs that follow. The black and white photos of women and men laboring in the cane fields, baggy clothes to protect them from the sharp-edged cane tops, suit covered by the end of a long day. He shows the bullock carts and trains that carry the harvested canes to the factory, derelict factory sites and rusty tanks that trace the fortunes of this industry over time. The other is a photograph of Rosalind taken in 1999, who is still to be found in the cane fields at that time. As Mr. Parasram writes, Rosalind was up long before dawn and walked several kilometers to get to the field to begin her harvesting task. In the darkness, she had to rely on the light of a flambeau. The field was burned the day before, and the ground where she was working was still parched and hot. Rosalind worked this early shift so that she could return home to get her children ready for school, he says. To a gender scholar like myself, these photographs are testimonies that Indian women combine wage earning and family care as a matter of course, something we continuously have to prove over and over again. The third and final set of photographs I focus briefly on are portraits of a people as they change over time and transform houses and are transformed by positions in the society. He starts the journey with his parents, Pandit Parasram and Sursasit Parasram, presented in a gossamer textured black and white photograph of veneration. This is an invocation to his own ancestral roots in his family album. As the book develops, the faces grow more expressive with age. Families extend and expand. Fashions and adornment styles change. Male leaders and female professionals emerge. Political battles are fought and won and lost. And yet culture survives. It survives and transcends interracial marriages and relocation and resettlement in the North. He challenges us to ask at the end of this book, what phenotype does Indianness possess? What attributes of culture will live on and why? The last chapter, entitled Faces of Tomorrow, are those of the young, the joy of discovery and wonder captured in eyes right and left, and postures that are centered. In this family album, history is rendered visually in passing time through iconic references to cultural images that Mr. Parasram defines as the symbols of change. The images ingrained in memory the celebration of lives and culture lived with pain, loss, decay, and rebirth. The book begins with the story of victimhood and ends with a narrative of hope and regeneration, imperceptibly tempering the refrain of indignities. It is aptly titled, Beyond Survival. I hope that I have encouraged you, as others have done, to buy this book. And once again, Mr. Parasram, I congratulate you on this publication. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Patesar, when you have finished escorting Dr. Mohammed, could you please join us on stage? It's time to have a musical interlude, and as you see, Panditji, Shri Mangal Patesar is now coming to join me on stage. My privilege to introduce this very distinguished gentleman. I already said Pandit Dr. Mangal Patesar, one of the 4 master artists in residence at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, he is also a person who has received the Hummingbird Gold for his service to Trinidad and Tobago in the field of music and education. He has a gold medal as well for Shastriya Sangeet, a master's in music, and a whole lot of other things. He has his own group, of course, as many of you know. You have enjoyed his music for many years. And he has taught extensively. His music has been used in documentaries and films.
Up to the moment I came into here, I didn't know exactly what to play. When I heard Dr. Pat Mohammed, images started to conjure in my mind as to what I should do. So I'm going to try to recreate some of the thoughts that she had, that she expressed, by way of my music. I'm setting everything in a raga, but that is fixed. But the other things that I'm going to do, it's all Pat Mohammed, Professor. So in my anxiety to get started, because I know I have to fix all this thing, the most important thing I did not mention, Jai, to your success and to everything more, and hope you do more than what you have done. Unfortunately, I cannot talk about the book because I have not yet seen it. But after hearing Dr. Pat Mohammed, I had a very comprehensive view of it. She gave me a pictorial representation of the book with her speech. So to you, Jai, and to everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mangal Patesar. Thank you once again, Shri Mangal Putesar Ji. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the second half of the program, in fact. There are still people to recognize. I wondered, where Chandrish was for a little while until I sat here enjoying the music. Then I spotted him in his favorite color, the yellow. So former Member of Parliament for Faizabad, my good friend Pandit Chandrish Sharma. It's very nice to have you and your son in our company. Shri Shekhar Mahabir will read for us. He is a teacher. He has taught here in Trinidad and Tobago and in the United Kingdom. He was at Irie High School for a while, for about 10 years, and during that time he was involved in the secondary school's drama festival. He was Irie's director. And in San Fernando he was involved with such distinguished people as James Lewa and Ralph Maraj and Torrance Mohammed. And you all know that they are national icons, each of them. And with them at the Drama Guild in San Fernando, Shekharji was in fact the public relations officer and also a director. I believe you acted at times, Mr. Mahabir, and then he, while in London, contributed articles and poems to the Caribbean Contact newspaper. It's my privilege now to invite him to read an excerpt from Beyond Survival.
Namaste. Karani Woman, a tribute to female workers in the sugar estates, originally written in 1999. Deep within her resides the power to persevere, to press through pain and heal. She is a survivor whose strength is greater than we know. She has always faced the sun and taken solace in its warmth. For generations, she endured abuse and degradation at the hands of those who considered themselves better than she. But she refused to let anyone make her inferior because she knew she was not. Her day starts when most of us are asleep, and through the night she provides the material comforts for her home and family before venturing out in the darkness, unable to defend herself against the dangers and uncertainties of nature and man. For generations, she cultivated our plantations, harvested our crops, and enriched our communities by raising children who have become professionals, teachers, leaders, and role models. And she has maintained her dignity despite society's disdain for her and her contribution to our development. She was born into slavery, lived through indentureship, and took us beyond survival to a life of comfort and affluence. She has seen numerous dawns with pain in her stomach from hunger. But she finds comfort from the rays of the morning sun that throw light on the harshness under which she labors to produce our wealth. She is mother, daughter, sister, wife, matriarch of a nation, the personification of Mother Earth. She is the Caroni woman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shekhar Mahabir. And ladies and gentlemen, that very inspiring excerpt from the book, something that's very close to my heart as well. Shekharji has flown all the way from London to do this reading for us. Thank you so, so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hamid Ghani is the director of the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Development at the University of the West Indies, the St. Augustine campus, is former dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the university. He is a well-known commentator, of course, in public affairs. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of the West Indies, an MA in political science from Fordham University, and a PhD in government from the local London School of Economics and Political Science. Besides that, of course, Hamid has been very generous, very kind to me, and he has been a very, very good friend of Jai Parasram. And it's my pleasure now to ask him to introduce our author, Jai Parasram.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, my friend Jai Parasram, Mrs. Parasram, my university colleague, Professor Patricia Mohammed, distinguished colleagues on tonight's program, ladies and gentlemen. I have known Jai Parasram for about 20 years. Before that, I knew him on the local television screen, broadcasting under the banner of Trinidad and Tobago Television, TTT. He left these shores to pursue higher education in journalism at Carleton University in Canada, where he earned a master's degree in journalism. He joined the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC, and retired after a quarter of a century there on November 30th, 2013. While there, he was a member of the team that inaugurated Newsworld, the CBC's 24-hour cable news service. He produced and edited the first newscast for the service on July 31st, 1989. He was a producer on the team that won a Gemini Award for the coverage of the Swissair airline disaster in Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia in 1998. Jai left Newsworld in 1998 and established Jyoti Communications. His main projects have involved training journalists, program development for radio and television, corporate imaging, event management, and media projects. He returned to the CBC in 2003 and worked with the online service cbc.ca until his retirement. Jai's career began at TTT in 1972, and he worked his way through television reporting, editing, production, interviewing, being a news anchor, and also an executive producer. He has won several awards for excellence in journalism and broadcasting. But tonight, he's not going to tell us about his journalistic prowess, but rather, he is going to tell us about his latest book, Beyond Survival. It is a book that cuts across political parties and the real or imagined political divide. It captures the imagination about cultural history and tells a powerful story in pictures with an accompanying narrative. Jai has had a very interesting career in media and communications. Oh, the stories he could tell. Perhaps one day he will tell those stories. But tonight is not about those stories. Tonight is about Beyond Survival. Jai, congratulations on the book. I know for you, it has been a labor of love. But for many of us, it is the legacy of a lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jai Parasram.
Thank you, Dr. Ghani. I'm delighted to be home and very honored to share this evening with you. Thank you all for coming, and may I also, everybody is special, everybody is happy to be here, I'm sure, but I want to in particular mention my friend and colleague Neil Giuseppe, who took 2 hours to get here from Arima. Both of us, when we were in our 20s, created a broadcasting revolution in this country and redefined television journalism for future generations. It has been an incredible journey, and there is still a long way to go. Every journey, we know, begins with the first step. This one began 173 years ago with only a few of our ancestors from a port in what used to be called Calcutta. But it is also my personal journey, one that began in our home and in the village that nurtured me. It is where I amassed much of what you will find in the book Beyond Survival. That explains why I have said this is a narrative with a passion that can only come from a storyteller who has lived this life, someone who has experienced the sacrifices that our parents and other elders made to take us beyond survival, away from the hardships and abuse they suffered. Their commitment and dedication provided the continuity that helped take us over the speed bumps and potholes along the journey. While I was working on this book, a colleague told me Indians should not celebrate our arrival here because there is nothing to celebrate. Of course, I disagreed with him and told him it really depends on how you view the canvas. I agree there was really nothing celebratory about life as an indentured laborer. In addition to the manual labor in the fields, Indians face adversities like depression, malnutrition, disease, and social stress, leading to alcoholism and domestic violence. But our ancestors refused to let those demons impede their will to survive. They fought back in order to survive and create a better life for future generations. All of us have lived that. Had it not been for their strength, their conviction that they could do better, their story would have had a tragic ending. But it didn't. This is a story of survival through a determination to stand firm, defeat a system of bondage and servitude so future generations could be free in the new land they embraced as home. They persevered and preserved their rich and diverse cultural and religious traditions and adopted the best in their new environment to move forward and to conquer the system through education and cultural persistence. Our ancestors created opportunity out of misery. That is the legacy of a people who divide colonialism, bigotry, ignorance, and persecution through their strong spirit of survival. They created new communities and dedicated to preserving the richness and glory of the motherland while embracing and enhancing their new home. In the end, we the people won, all of us, Indians and non-Indians alike. We won because they won. And together, all of us have contributed to building a diverse state that we have today and that is still evolving. That is what we must celebrate, and that is what we have celebrated. That is the story of Beyond Survival, a celebration of our people, a people who fought against the worst odds to live and work in a Western hostile environment in which they found no comfort, where they were nothing more than beasts of burden, cogs in the wheel of production to enrich the British Empire. It was a brutal life. When they boarded the various ships that brought them halfway around the world, our ancestors did so with hope for a better life. They never found it, but they never gave up hope, and their strong cultural roots kept their dreams alive. There is nothing kind about the brutality and hardships they faced. Having seen dreams turn to nightmares, they worked like animals for a shilling a day and looked forward to a day when their children would be free from the drudgery that characterized their lives on the plantations. It was no accident that the British colonizers of India created the conditions to exclude free men and free women from the colonial plantations and export instead Indians as a new labor force. If emancipation were genuinely compassionate, Britain would have allowed the freed slaves to provide the paid labor to sustain the economy, and we would never have been here. The British had a plan to banish the formerly enslaved people from the plantations by denying them a fair wage, and instead exported Indians to Trinidad, depriving others of work and negotiating power. That is the background to our journey that began in 1845. It began when India was under British occupation, shackled by a colonial power, motivated only by greed with no regard to the millions they starved to death, and shipped abroad to be the engines of British capitalism. Beyond Survival is their story. It is also ours. It is not a history book. It is not an academic work. It is rather an evocative and passionate narrative seen and told through the eyes of the grandson of indentured laborers. The greatest assets of my grandfathers, Jadunath and Omkar, and the 147,000 other Indian women and men who made the journey to the new land, were hope, dreams, and a cultural strength that insulated them from being lured into assimilation. They stood firm against all who tried to trample their culture. They suffered together, they moved forward together, and they conquered the hate, the bigotry, and the social discrimination. They were pariahs at the bottom of the ladder and were denied even the crumbs off the tables. But they never surrendered. Their religious beliefs, the cultures that had made them strong, fortified them against the abuse, and they rose like the unwanted desert flower to grow and blossom. It was an example of their tenacity and the survival of the human spirit. They embraced education and focused on family and community. They recreated the villages they had left behind, built communities where every child learned to respect elders and one another, where every home was a part of the extended family. They worshiped together in their homes, in temples, in mosques, and in churches. And through their effort, The village raised generations of responsible citizens, including one president and 2 prime ministers, and countless others who have helped build our modern state. We are an integral part of the cultural mosaic that is Trinidad and Tobago. Beyond Survival is really a fascinating journey, a record in words and pictures, a keepsake that belongs in every home and every library. It connects the past to the present and looks forward to a future that we entrust to the next and future generations. We cannot say where the journey will take us in the next decade or in the next 100 years, but we are confident that the cultural plurality that is part of our daily lives is an essential guide to tomorrow. Beyond Survival is that point of reference we never had. We have it now, and I urge you to cherish it not only for today, but also for all times. We owe it to our ancestors to continue this journey that began in 1845, and perhaps, like the river that is in constant motion, while we will always be changing, we will also remain the same. Beyond Survival is a gift for all of us. And now I have a special request. Dr. Deepak Pandey is here with us tonight, representing the High Commission of India in Trinidad and Tobago, and on behalf of my family, and on behalf of all the people Trinidad and Tobago, I ask Dr. Pandey to receive this gift for the Honorable Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India. Can we take it up?
Go to the front. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank Dr. Deepak Pandey for receiving this on behalf of the High Commissioner, Shri Vishwadeep Dey, and for the Prime Minister of India, the Honorable Shri Modi ji. Yes. Thank you so much. Your Worship, can we have you on stage, please? So we're about done here, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who have books and you would like Jai to sign them, Jai will remain on stage. You can come and see him here. Those of you who will be purchasing books, immediately after we end this program and you would like him to autograph those books, you get the books at discounted prices, so Kim tells me. And so I'm about done, but there is something I would like to say before closing. One of the things is really, when I say it, I'm going to compromise myself because it means no breakfast for me tomorrow morning. Since Ceremony is here, Jai's wife for how many years, I can't even remember. But she has been his constant companion throughout this journey, from concept to Beyond Survival. She's here, and I would like you to acknowledge her presence, Ceremony. The thing about, since she's here, I just go over and get breakfast every morning. But now, and she warned me not to introduce her tonight, so that means tomorrow I'll be on a starvation diet. But all the same, Ceremony, thank you very much for coming and being part of this and being such a faithful companion to Jai. Thank you very much. Beyond Survival, Indians in Trinidad and Tobago, 1845-2017. You have heard so much about it. For me, it's a story of endurance and resilience and faith, our story, the story of a people, the story of a community and really the product of 24 years from concept to launch. The book, as you have heard, is very significant. I saw it before it went to the printers, and it is very exciting, but it also is very inspiring and something that I will always hold very dear. I want to say thanks to Nigel Khan, booksellers, to Hansib, and particularly Mr. Arif Ali, the publishers of this book. And of course, my relatives who are here. There's a childhood friend of mine, and Jais, who's here with his wife, Mulchan and Chandra. Thank you for coming and being part of this. And so I want to thank Nigel and you, Kim, and everybody else on my own behalf, on behalf of the family, and on behalf of Jai and Ceremony, for allowing me this opportunity, allowing us this opportunity. So I'm going to invite Kim now to tell you what's going to happen next. Thank you all very much for being patient with me, and God bless you all.
On behalf of Nigel R. Khan, bookseller, we would like to take this honor in thanking you all for attending this event. It was most gracious to have you present with us this evening. On behalf of the author, thank you. And this program will not come to an end without the acknowledgement of our theme members, Nigel R. Khan, bookseller. Only with theme effort, love and care, our managing director always told us, treat people with love and empathy. Nigel, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all that you've done, and thank you for holding our team together. Mrs. Khan, Chairperson of the Board of Directors, please stand. Let us see who you are. Thank you very much, Mrs. Annette Khan, for leading this organization. We now invite you to join the line to have your book signed.